Hi, Nick Kolos from DataTrek here, and today's video is about a survey that we did last week asking investors how they thought the second half of 2025 would develop. Before I get into the details of the questions and the answers, let me just give you a few background points on the survey itself. We got 476 responses, 90% from the DataTrek community of professional investors and high net worth individuals. The rest came from social media. The survey ran from June 9 through June 12, so most of last week. There were 10 questions in total, all of which required a single reply, and we randomized potential answers wherever was appropriate to make sure we didn't have any bias built into the survey itself. We didn't offer any monetary compensation to anybody who took the survey, just offered the chance to enter a raffle to win some DataTrek merch. So now I'm going to review 4 of the, I think, most interesting questions and replies that we got from the survey in the rest of this video. The first question we asked was, how do you expect the S&P 500 to perform over the rest of the year? And here respondents were pretty bullish. 15% said it would be up more than 10% over the rest of the year. Another 45% thought it would be up between 5 and 10%, and only about 11% thought it would be down 5% or more. So in general, a pretty bullish response because we're about 2% away from new highs. And so 60% of our respondents thought we would make those new highs in the second half of the year on the S&P. So again, pretty bullish. We also asked which asset class do you think will perform the best over the rest of the year? And here the responses were pretty overwhelming in favor of U.S. large caps, 53% of responses. Gold was also near the top of the list at 17% of responses. Non-U.S. developed stocks, EFA stocks basically, another 12%, U.S. small caps 7%, and then EM stocks, cash, corporates, and treasuries all got less than 5% of responses. What I thought was intriguing about these replies is that they don't really scale with returns. Now, gold is up there because gold is doing great, up 28% on the year, so fair enough. A lot of people do like it as their top pick. But U.S. large caps were just over the majority, 52%, 53%. Of replies. Even though the S&P is only up 2% on the year, and EF is up 15, and EM stocks are up 12. So even though U.S. stocks have lagged year to date, a little over half of respondents thought they were the best choice for the back half of the year. Moving on to some stock selection. Which big tech stock do you think will perform best over the rest of the year? And here responses were pretty split. 30% of respondents said NVIDIA, 15% said Meta, and 15% said Microsoft. The balance below 15%, Alphabet at 14%, Amazon at 13%, Tesla at 9%, Apple at 4% of respondents. Here, performance does seem to be informing respondents' choices. Because when you look at the top 60% of responses, NVIDIA, Meta, and Microsoft, they're all up on the year. And the other names are all down on the year, and they got fewer votes. So I see 2 things in this. The first is momentum does matter. The second is that investors clearly feel that NVIDIA, Meta, and Microsoft have the best playbook right now for generative artificial intelligence and how to develop it and monetize it. So really a split camp here. Now, if you want to be a contrarian, obviously Tesla and Apple are your choice. If you think momentum is the right way to go, then NVIDIA and Meta. The survey says those are the names to go with. And then finally, it wouldn't be an investor survey without a Bitcoin question, obviously. So we asked, what is your outlook on Bitcoin in terms of price performance over the rest of the year? 55% were bullish, so just over half. Another 7% said really no opinion, or bearish rather, and then 39% said no opinion. And that I thought was really interesting because Bitcoin is not an asset where people have no opinion. They're either bullish, bearish, or on the sidelines, kind of waiting to see how things turn out. And I think that means that there is still a lot of potential for Bitcoin in terms of getting new investors, new adoption in the investor space. Where I think no opinion means really much not a holder yet or somewhat open-minded about it at least. So even if a lot of no opinion respondents just don't think they'll ever buy the asset, quite a few may. And so it's not as uniformly bullish, I think, as people would tend to think. There is still room for further adoption in Bitcoin. So let me just sum up very briefly. 3 points here. The first is there's really high levels of investor confidence right now in U.S. stocks. Not only visible in our survey, obviously, but also in very high valuations. S&P trading for 21.6 times forward 12-month earnings right now, and VIX readings of roughly average. So we're seeing that the investor survey really fits with the current valuation metrics that we're seeing in the market, and it's being, I think, also very consistent with the VIX levels. So pretty high levels of confidence. Whether that's good or bad is up to you, but the survey confirms what a lot of the math about the market tells us. The second is the American exceptionalism trade is clearly back in full force, at least when it comes to U.S. large caps, because what we found was that more than half of respondents think U.S. large caps are the best place to be over the rest of the year, even though they have not done particularly well in the first half. So the idea that the rest of the world's going to continue to outperform, our survey respondents aren't buying that idea at all. They really do believe that U.S. large caps are the way to go. And then finally, and I mentioned this before, momentum really matters right now in the market, particularly when it comes to single stock selection. Investors are much less interested in playing laggards like Apple and Tesla over the back half of the year than they are some of the winning names like NVIDIA and Microsoft. And that's interesting because if you want to be a contrarian, then obviously Apple and Tesla are your picks. However, that means you've got to feel pretty strongly that we can resolve U.S.-China trade problems, that Tesla can get back on track. I know a lot of folks think that way, but it's very important to understand that right now, those are really at the bottom of the pack in terms of investor preferences. So with that, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit like and subscribe, and be sure to check out DataTrekResearch.com for more information about us and how to get a 2-week free trial to our product. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.